Welcome to the next episode of the Truth Matters podcast. I'm Matthew Shanshay here with Mackenzie Drevitt. And today, Mackenzie, we're talking about what's coming in the United States, the unification of church and state. But let's review kind of a little bit about what other people experienced in this forced religious principles mindset, because that's really what unification of church and state is about. It's about forced religious principles. And we have examples of some of those in the Bible, and we'll just quickly touch on them. But what about Daniel's friend, the book of Daniel? Daniel and his friends, just Daniel's friends in this particular one, not bowing the knee to the Nebuchadnezzar golden image. Do you remember that?
And that's almost word for word of Revelation 13 if you look at it. Because it says that there was an image that was set up and they had to worship the image or they would be killed. It's the same type and antitype situation we're seeing. We see the example in the Bible and that it's going to happen again. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything's just repeating.
So what you're exactly right, that there is no new thing under the sun. And I see a lot of Christians today who either don't want to actually read their Bible or they only want to read the New Testament because the Old Testament is old. It's the, Judaism. It's outdated. It's angry God. It's all this stuff, but it's all one story. You can't separate the two without totally missing the context and the connections. Yeah. And so Daniel's friends not bowing the knee, I encourage people to go back and read the scenario that they're in because that scenario is going to happen again. And when you see it, you see there's a whole bunch of higher ups in government. Imagine if you're American, you understand, imagine it's the president, the vice president, all the Congress, all the House, all his top military generals, all these top aides, everyone you could think of, all the top people there. And there's only 3 people out of hundreds that don't bow the knee to this image. And they knew that doing so was going to cost them their lives, but they did it anyway. That will be the almost exact same principle that we are going to face again. Yes, it's several thousand years ago now, that instance, but the principle is exactly the same. And the forced aspect of worship and the ability for somebody to stand in faith despite the possibility of losing their lives, all that will be exactly the same.
Yeah, we have the same thing happening in Revelation 7, Revelation 13, Revelation 14, all these tied together, talks about the same thing. We have a group of people, reference the 144,000, that is not going to bow the knee, and that are giving this message, this 3 angels message saying, hey, don't worship the beast, don't follow the system, be separate, and they will be persecuted for that.
And we quickly see a couple other examples. Daniel in the lion's den, he was put to death, essentially. He didn't die because God spared him, but he was sentenced to death by being thrown in the lion's den for praying, and he didn't change any of his behaviors. He just did the same thing he did every day. The laws changed, and that was done specifically to get Daniel killed. Pharaoh sought to kill the Jews for leaving Egypt to worship God, and the remnant at the end will be sought to be killed because they will worship God and not the image that's set up. So we do see the Bible has written a lot about forced religious principle, and in every scenario, whether it was Nebuchadnezzar or I think for the lion's den, it was the king of Media,
Darius, yes.
Then the Jews leaving, like each instance shows that the other side, whether it was Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, or whoever, was doing the devil's work, meaning forcing religious worship. And we see that it never is God's will to force religious principle. It always has to be done out of love and free will.
Yeah.
So that leads us to kind of the next phase, which is we know what the old church state system looks like. We know where it comes from. We know the Bible does not advocate any forced religious principle, even if, let's say you and I wanted to instill the 10 Commandments everywhere. That's a noble cause. We want people to live by it. But the second we switch over to force we are now working for the devil. And that should be a clear trigger for anybody watching this, that the force element, even if the principles seem right, if there's force involved or compelling the conscience against one's own will, you're working for the dragon at that stage.
And that's where, even in the commandments, God made a distinction. He had the first 4 were unto God, the last 5 unto your fellow man, which is why in government we have not to kill people, not to steal people. We have all these laws. Well, why should we be doing those and not the ones to God? Because those are between our fellow man. But the ones to God, that has to be something that individually you have to choose.
And the freedom of choice is in part what Jesus died. When Jesus died, what it allowed you to do. He allowed you, and still does allow you, to choose him. But he will not force you. Even though he died for you, he will not force you to accept that free gift. He will still allow us to choose. So there's an element of Jesus' sacrifice that was there to uplift your free will. He died for your ability to choose. When God, creator, king of the universe, he could have forced Lucifer from the beginning to essentially be wiped out and not go through this whole thing, but he didn't. And I really respect what God did there, because in the face of all power, he still chose free will and love over force. Why would that be any different today?
And now when we're looking at the New World Order system, things are going to be forced, and they will be forced by what the Bible says is actually 3 main powers. And it says in Revelation 16, if you want to read that.
Yeah, so these are the 3 main forces that we as Christians, we as citizens of the world need to watch out for. We've told you that there's a forced worship system coming. Who's behind it? Revelation 16:13. It says, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs." We'll talk later about what the frogs mean, maybe in a different podcast. But for now, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, Satan, we know who that is, out of the mouth of the beast, that is the papacy with the Pope at his head, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, which we have quickly identified without breaking down in an exegesis style what the false prophet is. It is American Protestantism. Verse 14 continues. It says, "For they are the spirits of devils